Hello, my name is Ms. Loper, and today we're going to look at first grade math assessments and data, focusing specifically on remediation, summative assessment, and formative assessment. To start, I would like to start by looking at September's I-CAN statements. Now, these are what students should be able to do in my assessments, and I got these from my curriculum map. So if you can see on the left, it shows keywords that I picked, such as graph, solve, identify. I like to put these over here so I could simply look right away and say, okay, my students need to solve. And then I can go over and say, solve the story problem. It made it more easier for me. Next, we're going to look at my formative assessment. A formative assessment happens during the learning process by the teacher to help it make it so that the students can grow and that the teacher knows what the students need to work on. Now, to the right, it shows the sheet that I used, and there's three sections to it. So they need to read the number and then read the number as an actual number. So the first one's the number word, the second one's the number, and then the third one they need to draw a line from the word to the number. Now, if you look at the graph to the left, so I sectioned them by parts when doing my assessment. The first part goes with the first problem. So if you look here, students that did well, I have 10 students that did well. So that's good. Now, on part 2, though, I had more students that did well than students that struggled. So if you can see here, this will show me where my students need to work on, such as they struggle with reading the number 10 or reading the number 15, but are able to look at the number and actually say it. The next is my summative assessment. And a summative assessment is something that you use at the end of, after you did all your formative assessment, you gathered all the data, and it's the sum of all the information. So for my summative assessment, I did the sheet to the left. Now, this sheet has 9 problems. So I went ahead, and if you look at the chart to the right, it shows all 9 problems and how my students answered. This is out of 22 students, both of my assessments were. And if you can see, so the green is students who understood, blue is students who struggled, and yellow is students who didn't even try the problem, which is quite common, unfortunately. But a lot of my students did good with question 8. So if we look at question 8, I know that they're good at base 10 blocks. They didn't do so good, we'll say, on 3, because I would say 6, but half of them didn't try either. So if we look at 3 here, 3, you can notice that there's a lot of 1s blocks and that they're scattered, because there's also 1 blocks here on 9, but a lot of students got it right. So I'm wondering if it's the layout. So next, we're going to look at DOK. And this right here is a DOK chart. And what I did was I color-coded them by levels. So yellow is DOK 1, orange is DOK 2, blue is DOK 4, and green is DOK 3. So if you look here, it says find the sum. Now in DOK 1, if we look closely, we can see that it says in there finding the answer. So let's see here. Identify. So finding the sum or identify. And then this one says find the difference. So same as identify. And then for DOK 2, It says, how is some of the data alike and how is it different? Now that would be a comparison. So if we look in here, it shows the word compare. So each DOK has a different level, and what we do is we can plan. So if a student isn't doing very well at a DOK2 level, we can move them down to a DOK1 level so that they can use the skills of recalling. The next slide is the model of student intervention. So this is a pyramid, and it is in 3 tiers. The first tier, which is the red tier, is the majority of the class. Now this is about 80% of the students normally, and this is just the regular classroom. Doesn't mean students are pulled out or anything. These are students that are able to participate in the regular classroom and not have to do small groups. The next tier is small groups. Now these students aren't necessarily pulled out of the classroom, but they are in need of some help. This is about 15% of the students normally, and like I said, these students aren't normally pulled out. Now the last tier, these students most of the time are pulled out, and this is about 5% of the students. So these students will go to a special ed classroom for a certain subject or anything that they struggle with. The next thing that we're going to look at is the breaking things down or remediation. So if you look to the right, I put my summative assessment chart and I put the sheet that we discussed earlier. Now, how could I break this down so that it's more simplified for my students? I could simply break down the idea of the base 10 blocks. This means if a student doesn't understand a base 10 block, we could count how many blocks or squares are actually in a base 10 block. Next, we could actually get base 10 blocks models out and have them use hand-on experiences because some students need that. We could also have students line up because if you remember what I said earlier, a lot of the students were struggling because the ones were separated, such as if you look over here at 4, rather than them being in a straight line, they're all over. So some students may have counted wrong, such as 6. They may have only counted 4 rather than 5, whereas 7, they're in a straight line. Next, we could run through each question to make sure that students understand. Because like I said, most students understood 8, but we don't necessarily want to bump that question out because it does look like there were some that didn't understand it. Then we can, at the very end, we can work with individuals. So such as 8, so let's say these individuals still don't understand, then we can work with them independently. And we can set them up with text-to-speech, we can reduce their DLK level, or we can just give them examples, or let's say rather than doing the 9, they do 6. And that is the end of my presentation. Thanks for watching.